Welcome to the United Public Library for a concert called Soldier's Joy, Civil War in Song and Letters, featuring the consummate musicians from our great region of Central New York.
That's okay. Keep going. Central, great musicians, I think.
One can't stand squeaking. Is Amanda Straney on the fiddle, and she's doing vocals as well. And on the G, or
This is the D banjo right now.
on the D banjo is Bill Fahy from Rome, and Amanda, where are you? St. John's. And they are part of Crab Dugan, which is a branch of the Irish Celtic International music group. And they also have performed in other venues and other groups. They were last year on near St. Patrick's Day with the Rattlin Bog Band. So they are, shall we say, masters of many things. Tonight they are actually combining the letters of upstate Union soldiers in the Civil War with contemporary songs of the period, with many of which you may still recognize. And it is, shall I say, the premiere of this program.
The world premiere.
The world premiere of Soldier's Joy, the Civil War in song and music. So Bill, take it away.
Thanks for coming out tonight. That was the Era Jubilo, which was a written tune back in 1863 by Henry Clay Work, who was probably one of the most prolific songwriters during the Civil War era. Still around today is a common fiddle tune. A lot of people think it's traditional music. Robert E. Lee once said, without music there would have been no army. And music was really a large part of life for the soldiers in the war between the states, both in camp and in the field. It was really the main, probably was one of the only sources of entertainment for the soldiers, but it also gave voice to the feelings of the time. You'll hear that in some of the songs we're going to do in a little bit. And also, you'll hear more about this, but there were regimental bands in almost every unit in the Army. And it was a way they would coordinate their drills. You know, they would wake up to music, they would go to sleep to music, they would march to music, they would eat to music. So it was part of their lives.
Yeah, music was everywhere in the 1860s. It was part of most folks' everyday lives and common for nearly every family to play music in their home. By 1860, and this is hard to believe, but there was 21,000 pianos sold every year. And many homes had violins and banjos and a growing number of guitars.
And when I was researching this project, I found so many letters and diaries of soldiers who referred to music, and we're going to share some of that. And I found a lot of them from soldiers right here in the central New York, Oneida County, Madison County area.
So, many historians and musicologists credit the Civil War as the period that gave birth to the music that is truly American. There was a good mixing of backgrounds and cultures that acted as a catalyst, and the mixture produced some truly American sounds. So there's people coming from all over, and it's, you know, one of the first times that folk music was just commingled from north to south and everywhere in between. Army units included individuals from across the country, and they rapidly traded tunes, instruments, techniques. We're not going to trade instruments today, though.
No,
Maybe
I think we
our
probably should.
second world premiere. And the songs that arose from this fusion were the first American folk music with discernible features that can be considered unique to America.
It's pretty cool because a lot of them are still played today and all over the place. You've heard of them. The music industry itself, too, was growing at the time. By the end of the 1850s, there were over 5,000 different songs published in the form of sheet music and distributed around the country. Folks like Stephen Foster had already sold hundreds of thousands of copies of his songs, and that's how people entertain themselves, by buying sheet music and playing it themselves. And also, you had an entertainment industry. The Christie Minstrels were like the Beatles of their day. In the 1850s, they toured the U.S. and they toured Europe and played the songs of Foster and some of the writers of the day.
And music was a very effective way for people to express their opinions and their emotions. The songs made the message memorable, and you probably know that. You hear a song and it just brings you back to that time or place which you first heard it or where it was most memorable to you. And many Americans were barely literate, so it was a way for communication to happen, and they could understand it and they could also pass it along.
And during the war, soldiers passed down a lot of the music. As armies marched through the country, they traveled everywhere on foot, folks, and they put a lot of miles on. And as they did, they sang the songs of the day, or the tunes of the day were being played by the regimental bands. So it was a way a lot of folks heard the music for the first time. In fact, soldiers created the Union Army's most popular song, and I know you've heard it, John Brown's Body.
Again.
We're going to hear it, yeah.
So John Brown, he was a man of action. He was a man who would not be deterred from his mission of abolishing slavery. On October 16, 1859, he led 21 men on a raid of the federal arsenal at Harper's Ferry, Virginia. His plan to arm slaves with the weapons he and his men seized from the arsenal was thwarted, however, by local farmers, militiamen, and Marines led by Robert E. Lee. Within 36 hours of this attack, most of Brown's men had been killed or captured. Working most of his life, he never was financially successful. He actually filed for bankruptcy in his 40s. But his lack of funds, they did not keep him from supporting causes that he believed in. He and his wife, they agreed to raise a black youth as one of their own. He aided escaped slaves through their involvement in the Underground Railroad.
moved to North Elba, New York in 1849 to a community that was established by Garrett Smith, where Garrett had donated tracts of land to black families so they could settle up there. And Brown moved up there to kind of be a kindly father to them. Now, I can't imagine John Brown being a kindly father. He didn't really emerge to be a figure of major significance until about 1855, when he went to Kansas and got involved in the anti-slavery wars there. And after the attack on Lawrence, he led a violent reprisal, and he and his sons dragged 5 men and boys from their homes and murdered them with swords. So he was a pretty harsh man. Kindly father, yeah. He came back east, though, and he decided again to come to New York and see Garrett Smith to raise money to start a war by allowing the slaves to rise up in the South. And in October 1859, they attacked Harper's Ferry, and you heard the results. Well, the North was initially shocked by this, but soon he began to gain some significance in the abolitionist community. Thoreau said, "He did not recognize unjust human laws, but resisted them as he was bid. No man in America has ever stood up so persistently and effectively for the dignity of human nature." By the way, he was hanged on December 2nd, 1859.
In 1859, after abolitionist John Brown was hung, he became a hero throughout the North, as Bill was saying. And in the early days of the Civil War, the song John Brown's Body was sung all over the country. But the song actually started out being about another John Brown. This fellow was a Scotsman, and he was in Boston. When the war broke out, he joined the Massachusetts Volunteers. Sporting the same name as the abolitionist, Brown became a butt of constant joking and teasing. Someone would call out, "That can't be John Brown. John Brown's dead." Another wag would shout, "His body's a moldering in the grave."
The Massachusetts soldiers thought this was pretty funny, so soon they had a tune, the old camp hymn called "Say Brothers, Will You Meet Us?" And they sang it over and over, and it became the regimental song of the 12th Massachusetts. Well, it really picked up steam when they marched through New York City on their way south, and they marched down Broadway, and thousands of people heard them singing this song, so it caught the attention of the whole country. Now, John Brown himself, the soldier, was killed in battle June 6, 1882, but his song had spread all over. And you may have heard the Battle Hymn of the Republic. That was written as a result of John Brown's Body by Julia Ward Howe.
So on June 28, 1863, on the way to Gettysburg, the 97th Oneida Regiment marched through Emmitsburg, Maryland, which was described as a quiet town. It had not felt the miseries of war. Things were currently quiet and peaceful, but the men that were marching through knew they would soon be meeting the enemy. At this moment, someone at the head of the column struck the John Brown chorus, which was quickly taken up along the whole line, and presently every man fell into step with the cadence of the simple yet soul-stirring hymn.
John Brown's body lies moldering in the grave. John Brown's body lies moldering in the grave. John Brown's body lies moldering in the grave. His soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His soul is marching on. Fighting 69th, and some of their exploits throughout several wars. More than 150,000 Irishmen enlisted in the U.S. Army, and a lot of them did it out of loyalty to their new country. Back in that time, the Irish were on the low end of the social ladder, and that's putting it nicely. They came over here as indentured servants, so they felt by joining the Army they could prove their patriotism and become true citizens of the U.S. But as things dragged on and the casualties mounted, things got tough for the Irish Brigade, and it became harder and harder. And I got to change my. But this is a little song from the Irish Brigade, and also the fiddle tune is our title. So the tune is called Soldier's Joy. These days will be remembered by America's loyal sons. If it hadn't been for Irishmen, what would your Union done? Hand to hand we fought 'em out in the blazing sun. Stripped to the pants, we did advance at the Battle of Bull Run. Soldier's Joy, yeah, it comes from across the pond.
Nice.
Yes. So the Irish Brigade was proud of its Celtic musical heritage, and many of the tunes and songs played were passed throughout the Union and Rebel Army. Many were played by their marching pipe band. This tune, The Minstrel Boy, was played on the brigade marched out of New York City off to war.
All yours. Fighting 69th was probably the most famous of all the regiments in the Irish Brigade. And out of 2,000 regiments that were mustered into the Civil War, the 69th suffered the 6th most casualties. So they were in the front of a lot of battles. Their regimental battle cry in Gaelic was fahy which means clear the way. The regimental motto was an accurate observation about the Irish. Gentle when stroked, fierce when provoked. 69th was also famous for a cocktail that spread throughout the Union Army that was invented by the commander, Thomas Francis Meagher. The 69th cocktail was 3 parts of champagne and 1 part of Irish whiskey. They also had a marching tune that was very popular in the Civil War, and it was heard by General George Armstrong Custer.
Irish music. When the brigade was on the march, the band played many traditional tunes, after their whiskey, of course, the band played. Oh, was I making a reference to Irish drinking? Okay. So they played many traditional tunes that would become well known in America, and ones that would give soldiers hours of amusement, making up their own verses.
And you'll hear a little of that a little bit later. Right now, we got a couple tunes for you that come from across the pond, but were adapted here.
Sorry. Just keep that strum going like that. Okay.
There were two regiments that were mustered into existence in Oneida County in the early 1860s, the 117th Oneida and the 97th. Most of the volunteers were from Utica, Rome, and all the surrounding towns. They saw action at some of the real nasty battles in the Civil War: Gettysburg, Cold Harbor, the Wilderness, Antietam, Fredericksburg, Petersburg. In fact, the 97th was right in the thick of the action at Gettysburg, and they were right near the center when Pickett's charge came over on the last day. One of the soldiers wrote that as the rebels were retreating after getting licked, they heard the sounds of the rebel band playing "Nearer My God to Thee" as they went back across the field to their lines. Eugene Skinner was the chaplain of the 97th, and this is an excerpt from a letter he wrote home. Saturday night last, about 11 p.m., we were roused from our sleep by such cheers along our lines as only Union soldiers, flushed with victory or good news, can give. Thinking our men were making a grand charge on the rebels, we rushed out from our bunks, end to shovel, each anxious to know what was up. Soon a courier rode by, giving us the glorious news that Atlanta was ours. Then a band of one of the colored brigades on our left struck up the Star-Spangled Banner. Another band higher up the line played Hail Columbia. Another, the Red, White, and Blue. And another, Yankee Doodle. Finally, all the bands played together the latter melody with all the force they could muster, while our men from the Appomattox on the right, far away towards the Weldon Railroad on the left, doubled and redoubled their cheers. The effect was startling. Even sick men, shaking with chills and burning with fevers, forgot their ailments and cheered as loud as any. And I firmly believe that the charge had been ordered at that time against the enemy's entrenchments, our sick would have swept onward with the well, and woe would have been the Johnnies that stood in their way.
A letter from Charles Hayden from the 97th New York. As I sit writing, about 2 miles in front, the pickets are firing, and I hear the bang, bang constantly. There goes a cannon boom. So it goes, day and night. As it is towards evening, brass bands are filling the air with very sweet music. At almost every headquarters, sometimes half a dozen bands are heard at once. A strange commingling of the sounds. Last night, you could hear the singing and playing from camps a mile away.
Charles Hayden also could be a great political commentator today. I pulled this from one of his letters. It strikes me as something that we need more of in this country. Elise wishes me to be a Democrat. I wish she may be a Christian if she is not. Then she may be a Democrat or Republican. She may err in judgment, but she will not err in principle. She will aim to be right and do right. We should not think more of party than our country. I would rather the names Democrat and Republican would link us to us no more than that we should lose our free institutions. I would that we had a party without the imperfections of either, but as they are made of imperfect men, they will be imperfect, and we should choose the best in will. I believe that is all that they can do, and I believe that a union of these states will be established. I thought that was pretty cool and very eloquent for a soldier at the time.
Portsmouth, Virginia, July 2nd, 1863. Dear Sirs, with all the labor, suffering, and anxiety we as soldiers have to endure, we often have our fun, and well and right heartily do we enjoy it. A rather laughable circumstance occurred a short time since in our camp, which I will relate to show you that the night of 4th is not entirely gone up if we are way down here in a Virginia swamp. Bob was posted that night by the major in person, and he gave the most rigid orders that no living thing must pass the beat without the countersign. Bob took his position at his post, determined to be vigilant. Bob had walked his beat about an hour when he heard the sound of an approaching object. Soon, a lusty porker belonging to one of our many neighboring Secesh farmers came lumbering along directly towards Bob's beat, so closely that Bob knew at once what was approaching. But, being determined that his orders should be lived up to the very letter, he at once gave the challenge, "Who goes there?" No reply. Mr. Porker waddled along as though nothing had happened. "Halt!" cries Bob, and, bringing his gun to a ready, just as the porker was crossing his beat, he again called out to him, "Halt!" which did it no good. Bang went Bob's gun, and down came Mr. Porker. The camp was all in a furor in a second, and down came the major, officer of the day, and several more who were anxious to know what had happened, fearful that the Rebs were upon us.
They arrived finding Bob quietly standing by Mr. Porter, loading his gun as if nothing had happened. "What did you shoot the hog for?" said the major to Bob. "I done it, sir, to carry out to a letter my orders, sir. When I was put on post, sir, I was ordered by you, sir, to let no living thing pass my beat without the countersign. This thing tried to do it, and I put a stop to his impudence, sir. All right, sir, I suppose, sir," said Bob with imperturbable gravity. Yes, Bob, all right," said the major, "but you may let all hogs and dumb beasts pass hereunder without the countersign." Bob very demurely said, "Aye, sir. Always obey orders, sir. Military orders, sir. It'll be a long time before we shall forget Bob's hog adventure. Nothing new in camp. Same old story." Signed, the orderly.
Virginia, August 1863. To the editor of the Utica Daily Observer. Dear Sir, I hope you will excuse the liberty I take in addressing you. I am not going to tell you war news, for you can get plenty of that. In fact, I am going to ask as a favor, will a generous public do something to keep our suffering and starving families alive, till we, their natural providers and protectors, come home, if it is God's will, to see them ourselves. True, sir, that man had no right to leave his family, but of such is our regiment composed, and had it not been for just such men, the 117th would not have been so soon filled up. The country called for and needed the men at the time, and in response the men came. Do something for them, for I tell you, my dear sir, on the lonely picket post, in darkest night, our thoughts go home, and oh, the agonizing thought comes to him. Oh God, what will become of my wife and family? Now, sir, this is no fancy of mine, for had you been with us on our march from Petersburg on the 31st of July, you would have seen our division bury 19 men on the march, and we halted at noon too. That day I saw men who fell out of the ranks, and all of their thoughts were, what will become of my family? Well, does the soldier know his pay does not begin to support those at home? And if you could only see how the soldier's eye sparkles when he thinks the people are doing what they can to relieve his anxiety. I am sure those of you at home would not begrudge helping to get along. I tell you, when a soldier knows his folks are all well and doing well, it makes his duty light, and lightly again it makes a new man of him. Today I have received a letter from my wife, and the way my family suffers is not very encouraging for me to re-enlist. Now, sir, I do not pretend to ask you to publish this in your paper, but if it is possible to wake up the people in Utica or in Oneida County, in God's name, let it be done. If it is possible, let the families that are in need come forward, inquire into their character, and relieve those that are in worst in need. As for our pay, we have heard enough of being paid this last 3 months, but it has not yet come. Meanwhile, our families are suffering. Yours, J.M.
volunteers was a fellow by the name of Perry Miller, and he was down outside of White House Landing in Virginia, in camp. And here's enemy territory, and the local citizens came to camp, and they asked the soldiers if they would help with a local fundraiser. So they had a strawberry festival, and the purpose of it was to raise money for musical instruments for their church. So he talked about that and how neat it was, and how it was still feeling like one country. That the North and South were still a lot closer than most people thought.
A letter from David Shapley of Utica, New York, in 1861 describes, "Our leisure hours are devoted to ball playing, reading, writing, sparring. We while away the evenings in singing. We have a glee club. It's called Ellsworth's Glee Club, which discourses splendid music, accompanied by a melodeon."
I wish I was an apple hanging on a tree. It's decent that you take a bite of me. Get on home, get on home, get on home, Cindy. I'll marry you someday. Get on home, get on home, get on home, Cindy. I'll marry you someday. I wish I had a quarter for every gal I know. Cindy, she's the best of all, that's why I love her so. Get on home, get on home, get on home, Cindy, I'll marry you someday. Get on home, get on home, get on home, I'll marry you someday. You ought to see my Cindy, now she lives way down south. She's so sweet with the honeybees, they fly right to her mouth. Get on home, get on home, get on home, Cindy, I'll marry you someday. Get on home, get on home, get on home, Cindy, I'll marry you someday. There was probably not a regiment in the Union Army that did not have at least one fiddler or a banjo player or some kind of musician in the ranks. And since most of the war the soldiers spent their time hanging around in camp, not fighting battles, music was heard just about every night. And no matter how good the player was, they were sure to gain a lot of attention. Yeah, I would have been popular back then. Yeah. What's really cool, when I was researching this project, it was estimated that there were over 50,000 musicians that were enlisted as musicians in the Union Army. There were 618 regimental bands, and in 1861 alone, the U.S. government spent $4 million just to equip the bands. But the bands had a function. They transmitted the orders, charge, retreat, meal call, reveille. They also set the beat for the marching and the drills. But musicians didn't have it all that easy. They had other duties too. And some of them were not that pleasant. One of their duties was to retrieve the wounded and the dead from the field of battle. Another one was to administer punishment. So you can imagine how popular that made them with the fellows in the ranks. And it was unpopular. One of the musicians, Augustus Myers, received 30 days in the guardhouse for refusing to whip a man.
Dan Butterfield was a native Utican who became a Union general. He was awarded a Medal of Honor for rallying his brigade under withering fire. He was also known for a bad temper that frustrated fellow officers. But he also had poetry in his soul. One night in July of 1862, he called the brigade bugler to his tent. He wasn't happy with the regulation bugle call that was played at the end of the day to signal lights out. It wasn't very musical, as he thought, and he thought something different would be better. He had something in mind. He whistled it for bugler Oliver Norton, and they noodled around with it until they had something that Butterfield was satisfied with. Norton used the new call that night. Buglers from other brigades camped nearby picked it up and began using it as well. It spread throughout the whole army and to the Confederate Army as well. And so a collaboration began between a general and a bugler led to 24 notes, the haunting melody we know as taps.
Soldiers also made up their own verses to well-known songs. And The Girl I Left Behind, obviously a popular theme of soldiers in the war, also a popular song that came over from the British Isles. But this is a verse a soldier from Indiana made up. If I ever get through this war and a rebel all don't find me, I'll hitch my cart to the Northern Star and the girl I left behind me. On The Girl I Left Behind that I probably shouldn't have put in the show, but I just like to take it. But it's from the South, so that's the only Southern tune you'll hear tonight. Along that theme of The Girl I Left Behind, some letters that we found from a couple of New Yorkers out in western New York, Sarah Stilson and Oliver West. They had met at school in 1860. And in 1862, West was mustered into the 130th New York Volunteers. After she urged him to enlist, West wrote, "Women have no right to press themselves out of all bounds of propriety and fitness and make themselves ridiculous in pushing their sons, their brothers, their lovers, their friends and acquaintances out of doors into the army." And later in the letter, he goes on to talk about the war itself. They will either conquer and subjugate us or we them. For my part, though, I feel a sorrowful, mournful sternness, a cold-blooded, heartless inexorableness, an unchristian mercilessness as I utter it. Yet do I say, let us destroy them. Let us make them to us, and more so, as Ireland is to England, as Italy was to the Goths and Vandals, rather than ourselves be overrun and conquered, or a republic cut into many petty sovereignties.
In Sarah's reply to West, she voices her dismay at his view of the war and encourages him to be more optimistic. She defends the role of women in the war effort. "Don't think that we northern women who can't fight are non-caring, and perfectly at ease through all of your soldiers' sufferings. If there is anything we can do, we will do it. We will remember you, if that will do you any good. We will write you long letters too, if that will do you any good. We will pity you when you are sick, if that will do you any good, or if it won't, for that will be spontaneous, and we will pray for you.
I have the wrong band.
Oh,
That's why it sounds funny.
you were supposed to help with that. You're on that side.
Okay, now I have the right instrument.
Want to fight about it?
Yeah.
Don't stop a moment to think, dear John, our country calls and goes. Don't fear for me nor the children, John, I'll care for them, you know. Leave the corn upon the stalk, the fruit upon the tree, and all our little stores, dear John, yes, leave them all to me. Take your guns and go, dear John, yes, take your guns and go. For who can ride the ox, dear John, and I can use the hoe. Army short of blankets, John, take this heavy bed. Run and move and live a girl and work and with great care. A rose in every corner, John, and here's my name you'll see. On cocoa ground the warm a field, because they're made by me. Then take your guns and go, dear John, yes, take your guns and go. For who can drive the ox, dear John, and I can use the hoe. Now goodbye to you, dear John, I cannot say farewell. We'll hope and pray for the best, dear John, his goodness none can tell. May his arm be round you, John, to guard you night and day. Be a beloved country shield till war shall pass away. Then take your guns and go, dear John, yes, take your guns and go. For who can drive the ox, dear John, and I can use the hoe. In one of Sarah's last letters to Oliver, she writes, "Oh, I enjoy getting letters. What a strange throb there is to an unread letter. Get a letter just as you are going into battle. Put it in your vest pocket with the seal unbroken, and go and fight. How you'll hear its heartbeat. What if such a letter should be found with a dead soldier? Wouldn't the unbroken seal have a kind of mysterious signification?"
We shall be, but we shall miss him. There will be one day for cheer. We shall linger to caress him while we breathe our evening prayer. When just a year ago we gathered, joy was in his mouth alive. The golden tell us that recent glory evermore pressing out. But this soothes our anguish only, sweeping o'er our heartstrings now. Sleep today, O early fallen, in thy green and narrow bed. Dirty from the pine and cypress, mingle with the tears we shed.
We shall leave,
Shall
but we shall miss.
shall miss him.
There will be
One vacant chair.
We shall
Shall
linger.
linger to caress him while we breathe our evening prayer. While we breathe our evening prayer.
Over 20,000 songs were written during the war years. You've heard a lot of them tonight. Songwriters such as George Root, William Shakespeare Hayes, and Henry Clay all were very popular in their day. Some of the songs that we played tonight were written by these composers. But the most popular songwriter of the era was Stephen Foster, whose music was played and sung throughout the war.
He wrote for Christie's Minstrels, who were the most popular entertainers of the day, and there were many imitators. And his music was popular in the country, but it still endures today. And if you go to any gathering of old-time musicians, you're likely to hear this tune. Also one of his songs. It's called Angeline the Baker.
Stephen Foster was famous for his songs of the South and Southern slaves, like Angeline. His sheet music sold over 1 million copies. He was the first songwriter to accomplish this feat. The Confederate soldiers loved Foster for the way that he portrayed the South, and many wrote home asking their loved ones for the latest Foster compositions. Foster only made one trip below the Mason-Dixon line in his life.
You would think the guy would have been rich and famous and revered, but he wasn't. During that era, songwriters made pennies for their songs and the publishers made the money. Foster died in New York during the winter of 1864. He became an alcoholic, and during his last year alive, he would go into the taverns of New York and sing this song for drinks. His friend George Birdseye wrote, "On more than one occasion in a grocery barroom, I have heard Stephen Foster sing that good old song of his with a pathos that only a state of semi-inebriation had lent to the voice."
Let us pause in life's pleasure, count its many tears, while we all some sorrow will pour. There's a song that will linger forever in our ears. Oh, hard times come again no more. 'Tis the song, the sigh of the weary. Hard times come again no more.
more songs, but we'll shorten up the story. So I'll try and tell the story quick.
Okay.
This is, when I first heard this was really my favorite story of all. The Battle of Fredericksburg, and both the 97th Oneida and 117th were there. One of the bloodiest battles of the war, and both sides, after the battles had ended, were licking their wounds in camp. And that night, the bands on both sides were playing. And usually, the twilight, when the armies were that close, they would have battles of the bands. They would try to drown each other out. That's where the term came from, the Battle of the Bands. But this night, one of the Union bands started playing "Home Sweet Home," and then the Confederate band started picking up the tune, and the bands all up and down the line started picking up the tune. You could hear a pin drop. Every soldier, everyone stopped what they were doing and paid attention to music. And they started thinking about home. One of the soldiers wrote that everyone went crazy. But what really brought it home to me was, he said, at that moment we could have walked across the river, shook hands, and ended the war on the spot. I'd like to thank Tom and the United Library for having us. And again, thanks for hanging in.
Take it on the road.
Their game is up, their hope is fled. We'll make them pay for the blood they
Irish cruel war has just begun and
We'll all drink stone blind, Johnny, fill up the bowl. In 1862, hurrah, boys, hurrah. 1862, hurrah, says I. In 1862, we'll whip that whole darn rebel crew. We'll all drink stone blind, Johnny, fill up the bowl.
In 1863, hurrah, boys, hurrah. In 1863, hurrah, says I. In 1863, Lincoln declared the slaves were free and
We'll all drink stone blind, Johnny, fill up the bowl. In 1864, hurrah, boys, hurrah. In 1864, hurrah, says I. In 1864, we'll elect old Abe for 4 years more, and we'll